I'll never forget what happened that night backstage at the Grammys. Kanye West did something in the dark, something no one was meant to see, and I was paid to forget it. Sounds insane, doesn't it? You're probably thinking, what could be so bad that they'd pay someone to erase it from their memory? Well, I wish I could forget, but I can't. And now, it's time you know the truth. My name is Chris. At least that's what I tell people now. I used to work as a low-level assistant doing whatever needed to be done for the music industry elite. Back then, I was just another body, another name lost in the blur of chaos that surrounds the bigger stars. It was 2019 when everything started to unravel. When I found myself more involved than I ever should have been. The Grammys were always an event, sure, but they weren't the event to me back then. I'd seen it all before, celebrities strutting in and out, photographers snapping photos, and assistants like me scrambling to make sure everything went smoothly. But there was always a strange energy behind the scenes. It was something you couldn't put your finger on. The air wasn't just filled with excitement and nerves. It was also filled with a thick, quiet fear. And then Kanye walked in. He didn't look like the man everyone saw on stage. No, this Kanye was different. He wasn't the confident rapper making headlines with his latest fashion line or his controversial tweets. The Kanye I saw that night was something else, something far darker. I'd heard the rumors, of course. Everyone in the industry has. The whispered stories about Kanye's eccentricities, his visions, and the strange rituals that he seemed to be involved in. But to hear it is one thing. To see it? That was something entirely different. It started innocently enough, at least. That's how it seemed at first. Kanye was backstage like anyone else, preparing for his moment in front of the cameras. I was tasked with running some last-minute details. Maybe it was a simple wardrobe change or making sure his entourage was where they were supposed to be. Nothing that screamed danger. At least, that's what I thought. But as I passed through the dimly lit halls, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. It was something small, something almost invisible, but it was there. The doorman at the entrance to one of the exclusive backstage rooms was standing completely still, not moving a muscle. I tried to wave at him to get his attention, but he didn't even blink. His face was expressionless, but what unnerved me the most was his eyes, or rather, the lack of them. His eyes were completely black, as though the sockets had been hollowed out, empty. It was like looking into a void. I froze for a moment, unsure of what to make of it. The doorman had always been there, watching the entrance, but never like this. I thought maybe it was a trick of the light, or maybe I was just imagining it. After all, it was a stressful night, and I'd been running around all evening. But something about that man, it didn't sit right with me. The way his head tilted slightly to the side, like he could hear something I couldn't, something only he was attuned to. It was as if he knew things that no one else did. It's strange, but in that moment, I felt like I was walking into a trap set by forces far beyond anything I could understand. I shook off the feeling I had a job to do. I couldn't afford to be distracted, so I kept moving, trying to focus on the work. But the feeling of being watched didn't leave me. As I made my way through the backstage halls, I saw more strange things, small, subtle details that I couldn't explain away. The air smelled different in places, thick and sour. Some of the staff were acting off. I could feel the tension in their posture, like they were holding their breath. It was like everyone knew something, but no one was brave enough to talk about it. And then I got a glimpse of Kanye. I wasn't supposed to be near him, let alone close to him, but I was there, standing in the hallway, trying to stay out of sight when he passed by with his entourage. He didn't seem like the Kanye everyone knew. There was no swagger, no confidence. He moved like he was in a trance, almost like he wasn't fully aware of his surroundings. His eyes, those eyes, were locked in a distant, faraway gaze, and his face was unnervingly calm, like he was in the middle of some deep contemplation. But then, something changed. He looked directly at me, and when our eyes met, I swear I saw something in his eyes that I will never forget. It was pure darkness, like the whole room disappeared, and there was just this void in his stare. I should have walked away. I should have turned around and pretended I didn't see him, didn't feel his presence, but something inside me, something primal, kept me there. The air felt thick, and every second seemed to stretch out longer than it should have. It was like the world had paused for just that brief moment, and I was standing on the edge of something terrible. He said something, but I couldn't hear it at first. His voice was low, barely a whisper, but I could make out the words, "Come with me." I didn't even think. I just nodded. And before I knew it, I was following him down the hall, into a room I'd never seen before. A room with no windows, no light, just shadows. It was almost as if the darkness itself was waiting for us. I won't go into the details of what happened in that room. Not yet, but know this. Kanye wasn't the only one there. And what I witnessed was something I wasn't meant to see. Something I couldn't unsee. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that room, not with Kanye, not with what was happening behind those closed doors. But that's the thing about this world. The world I was now a part of. The lines between what's normal and what's not get blurred. It happens without you even realizing it. When Kanye motioned for me to follow him, I didn't think twice. It wasn't because I had any particular loyalty to him. Hell, I'd only seen him on stage, heard his music, and read the headlines. He was an enigma, a legend, a man who had turned himself into a god in the eyes of many. But the way he looked at me, the way he spoke, something about that made me feel important, like I was being let in on some kind of secret. So I followed him. The hallway was narrow, winding through the backstage area like a dark artery pumping blood through the veins of the event. The lights flickered overhead, casting long, jagged shadows against the whitewashed walls. For a moment, I felt the weight of it, the pressure of the whole evening bearing down on me. Celebrities, agents, managers, security. Everyone moving in haste, everyone with purpose. But then there was this eerie stillness that followed us. It was as if time itself slowed down. The chaos of the event being held at bay by the quiet presence of that room at the end of the hall. We finally reached it. A door at the far end of the hallway, black and unmarked. No sign, no visible label, just the cold metallic surface that seemed out of place amid the usual polished veneer of the venue. I didn't even know if it was a dressing room or a private space for the higher-ups. But the way Kanye approached the door, like he'd done this 1,000 times, made me feel small. He didn't knock, didn't pause. He just pushed it open and stepped inside. And for a second, I stood there, staring into the abyss of that dark space. Then he turned back, caught my eye, and gestured for me to come in. "Don't worry," he said, his voice low, almost calming. "It's just us. No distractions." His words, for a moment, made it feel like everything was fine, like this was normal. I felt a momentary easing of the tension that had been building in me since I first saw the doorman. His calm demeanor was a false sense of security, something I clung to in the face of the strange unease that had been crawling under my skin ever since I'd stepped backstage. But the moment I crossed that threshold and stepped inside, I realized I was wrong to think I'd ever feel comfortable again. The room was dimly lit, with only a few lamps casting their golden light onto the worn furniture scattered across the floor. It felt like a space that hadn't been used in a long time, as if no one had bothered to clean it. The air was thick, almost stifling, and it smelled faintly of old leather and something metallic, like blood. Or maybe it was just the smell of the place itself, steeped in too many secrets. There was a low hum in the background, like an electrical buzz that never quite stopped. It came from the far corner, where a strange piece of equipment sat, covered with a cloth. I couldn't tell what it was. My eyes kept drifting toward it, but I quickly turned away, trying to focus on Kanye, trying to ignore that strange knot forming in my stomach. He had already made his way to a chair by a window, though I noticed that it was more like a shelf than an actual view. The curtains were drawn tight, and no light from outside seeped through. The whole room felt suffocated, closed off from the world, as if everything beyond that door didn't exist. He sat there, still in his trance-like state, as though he wasn't quite with me yet, or with the world. He was somewhere else, somewhere far removed, eyes distant, hands resting on his knees as though he was waiting for something. It was like watching someone in the middle of a deep meditation, but there was no peace in his presence, no tranquility. I shifted uncomfortably from foot to foot, unsure of what I should do. My body was tense, my arms crossed in front of me, not sure if I should sit down, stand, or just leave. But something kept me there. A pull, a weight heavier than my own hesitation. I couldn't bring myself to sit. Instead, I found myself walking over to the other side of the room, my feet almost moving on their own accord. My eyes kept catching the strange object in the corner, but I avoided looking directly at it. I could feel its pull, its strange and magnetic influence, as if it was calling to me, urging me to come closer. The hum grew louder as I neared it. The light from the lamps flickered overhead, and I felt the temperature drop. The room, despite the odd warmth of the lamps, felt cold, a chill that seemed to come from deep within the walls, crawling under my skin and seeping into my bones. Kanye didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and didn't care. He didn't move, didn't say a word. There was something unsettling about his stillness. I began to feel as though I wasn't just in a room with him, but that I was intruding, that this space, this moment wasn't meant for me. Maybe it was never meant for anyone. I glanced back at him, and in that moment he looked up at me, directly into my eyes. And then he smiled. But it wasn't a smile that made you feel welcome or at ease. It wasn't a smile that made you feel good inside. It was unsettling, like he knew something I didn't. like he was seeing something in me, something I couldn't understand. The sound of the hum, now almost deafening, filled the room. And for the first time since I entered, I realized I wasn't the only one who was uncomfortable. Something was wrong. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. The longer I stood there, the more I felt like something wasn't right. It wasn't the room, not the flickering lights, or even the suffocating air. It was him. Kanye. The way he kept his distance, yet seemed to study me in a way that made my skin crawl. The silence stretched on, hanging thick in the air like a heavy fog. His eyes never left me, but his body remained unnaturally still, almost too still, like a statue waiting for something or someone to make the next move. I took a deep breath, trying to shake the feeling, trying to calm my nerves. The hum from the corner of the room was maddening now, like it was reverberating in my bones. My gaze shifted from Kanye to the corners of the room, where shadows seemed to move unnaturally, twisting just out of the corner of my eye. I couldn't tell if it was just the poor lighting or something else entirely, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. Then, the door creaked open. A man in a sharp suit stepped in. One of Kanye's staff, I assumed. He looked briefly at me, then at Kanye. There was something about the way he entered the room. He didn't look at me like I was an assistant or just another person in the space. No, his eyes slid over me as if I didn't belong there, as if I was somehow intruding. His lips were pressed into a thin line, and the sharp angle of his jaw suggested a man used to being in control. He was tall, his shoulders squared with military precision, but there was something in his eyes that didn't match the calm exterior, something that flashed for just a second, but it was enough. I could tell he wasn't happy to see me there, though he didn't speak a word. He just walked past me, his steps calculated, as if he didn't have time to waste. I barely moved, standing there frozen in place as he passed by me, the chill of his passing almost palpable. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way he didn't acknowledge me, the way he looked through me as if I was invisible, made me feel small. Like I wasn't meant to be in this world. Kanye didn't seem to notice the tension. In fact, he hadn't said a word since I entered. He just sat there, still in that trance-like state. He didn't even acknowledge the man who walked by us, as if he had no idea he was in the room. For a brief moment, the room fell silent again. That heavy, oppressive silence. Then the man in the suit leaned down to Kanye's ear. I could barely hear what he was saying, but I caught the words, "It's almost time, and everything's prepared." The words were said with such cold finality that I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Kanye didn't respond. He didn't flinch. He didn't even acknowledge the man's presence. He just stared straight ahead. The same vacant expression on his face. That was when I realized something. Something wasn't right. This wasn't just a normal backstage moment before the show. No, this was something else. This was a kind of ritual, one that I didn't understand, and frankly, one I didn't think I wanted to. I felt a twinge of panic start to crawl up my spine. I wasn't meant to be here. I wasn't meant to see any of this. I stepped back, almost instinctively, but my movement didn't go unnoticed. The man in the suit, he turned and shot me a glance that could freeze anyone in their tracks. His eyes were dark, too dark. And when they met mine, I felt like he was looking through me, stripping away every piece of my identity. His lips curled into a smile, but it wasn't one that reassured me. It was cold, calculated. Like he knew exactly who I was and exactly what I was worth in that moment. Nothing.
"Stay where you are," he said, his voice like ice. I froze. My body wouldn't obey me. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't move. Kanye's gaze shifted for the first time in what felt like forever. He looked directly at the man in the suit, his expression finally changing. But it wasn't the Kanye I had seen on stage, the confident, charismatic persona who had commanded the world's attention. This was a different Kanye. His eyes were wild, desperate, like someone who was losing control. And in that moment, I could almost feel the shift in the room. It was subtle, but it was there. The air grew colder, heavier, and the humming sound from the corner of the room intensified, almost vibrating the walls. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked out that door. But I couldn't. The man in the suit walked over to a locked door in the corner of the room, the one I hadn't noticed before. It was small, a door that looked more like a closet than anything else, but it stood out against the rest of the room. It was almost hidden. I couldn't explain it, but it felt off.
The man in the suit fumbled for a key, his movement swift and deliberate. The sound of the lock turning was like a gunshot in the silence. I watched, my heart racing, as the door creaked open to reveal a dark, narrow hallway. There was nothing remarkable about the hallway, but the moment the door opened, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The kind of dread you feel when you realize you've crossed a line that you shouldn't have.
The man stepped back and turned to Kanye. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Kanye's eyes shifted toward the door, then to me. And for the first time since I'd met him, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't coldness, wasn't emptiness. It was fear. Real fear. But it was the kind of fear that was so subtle, so carefully concealed, that most people wouldn't have noticed it. The man in the suit said nothing more. He walked toward the open door, his body language rigid, and beckoned Kanye to follow. Kanye's body shifted almost involuntarily, as if he was being pulled by some unseen force. His hands twitched at his sides, as if he were unsure of what to do next. The moment felt frozen in time. The darkness behind the door seemed to draw in closer, like the walls were closing in on me. I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach, something deep and primal telling me that I had no place here, that whatever was going on was far beyond my understanding, and that I shouldn't be there to witness it. I didn't know what to do. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't move. "Don't follow us," the man in the suit said, his voice low. A final warning. And then, just like that, they were gone. The door clicked shut behind them, and the room seemed to settle into an eerie quiet. But I didn't feel better. If anything, I felt worse. I felt the oppressive weight of the room intensify. The hum from the corner of the room stopped abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. I stood there for what felt like hours, unsure of what to do, but knowing I had already seen too much.
But that was just the beginning. I can't quite put my finger on the moment it all shifted. One minute I was standing in that dark, suffocating room, trying to make sense of everything I had seen, trying to hold on to any shred of normalcy. And the next, I knew deep down that something was about to happen that I couldn't undo. It was the kind of feeling you get when you know you're standing on the edge of a cliff, but you're too paralyzed to move. The world around you feels different, warped, like you're seeing it through a cracked lens. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to know what was about to unfold. But I had no choice. I was already in too deep. The door had slammed shut behind Kanye and the man in the suit, leaving me alone in the room. That heavy silence was all that remained, thick and suffocating, filling every inch of space. I tried to steady myself, taking shallow breaths, trying to ignore the way my heart was racing in my chest. My legs felt weak, as if the floor beneath me had lost its stability. I couldn't bring myself to move, not even when I heard the faintest scrape of something against the floor, like a chair dragging itself across the room. I blinked. It wasn't possible. I had already checked the room. There was nothing there, nothing. But the scrape came again, this time louder, closer. I spun around, my pulse quickening. I was alone. I had to be. Right? Then came the real shock. There, in the far corner of the room, was a figure. It wasn't Kanye. It wasn't the man in the suit. No, this was something, or someone, entirely different. It was a shadow, yet it was solid, like a human form bathed in pure darkness. The figure was cloaked in it, an inky black that seemed to absorb the light, leaving nothing but a silhouette. It was tall, unnaturally so, towering above me. And for a moment, I thought I was imagining it, my mind playing tricks on me. But the figure moved. It was slow at first, as though testing the space, adjusting to its surroundings. And then it took a step toward me, dragging its feet across the floor with that same eerie, grinding sound. I froze. I couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The room was suffocating, my chest tightening with each passing second. I wasn't sure what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't human. I felt it in every part of me, the primal instinct that screams when something is wrong, when something isn't right. I backed away slowly, inching toward the door, my legs trembling, my breaths shallow. But the figure didn't stop. It didn't even acknowledge me. It was as if I wasn't even there. Then, it did something that made the hair on my arm stand up straight. The shadow reached out, its hand or whatever it was, stretching forward slowly, deliberately. And when it touched the wall, the whole room seemed to shudder, like it was being pulled into another dimension. I could feel the temperature drop, the air turning dense and cold. Every inch of my skin prickled with the unnatural chill. I heard a low, guttural sound, something that was both a whisper and a growl. I couldn't tell where it came from, but I felt it deep in my bones. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, locked in place, unable to tear my gaze from the dark figure in the corner. My thoughts were scattered, my heart racing in panic. What the hell was happening? What had I gotten myself into? I tried to speak, but my voice was caught in my throat. It was like the air around me had thickened, pressing down on me with a weight I couldn't escape. I felt like I was suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. And then, something even worse happened. I could hear voices now, but not like the ones you'd expect. These were low, incomprehensible murmurs that seemed to be coming from all directions. It was as if the room itself was alive, whispering in languages I couldn't understand. They were coming from the dark figure in the corner, and from the walls, and from somewhere beneath the floor.
I tried to block them out, but they were everywhere, filling my ears, my mind, my very soul. The figure moved again, closer now, and I felt the coldness of its presence seeping into me. It wasn't just a physical cold, it was something deeper, something that made me feel wrong, as if I was being touched by something beyond this world.
I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was like every ounce of energy I had was being drained away by its presence. The whispers became louder and the cold intensified. I felt my body trembling, shaking with fear, but I couldn't make it stop. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the figure stopped.
Everything fell silent. The whispers, the shadows, the cold, it all just stopped. It was as though the room had become a vacuum, sucking in all sound, all life, leaving nothing behind but an overwhelming emptiness. But that silence, that dead silence, it was worse than anything.
I slowly turned to face the door, my body still trembling with fear. I knew I had to leave, but I couldn't make my legs move. I felt as if I were trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. The shadow still lingered in the corner, but now it was still, watching me.
I tried to speak again, but my voice was a mere whisper. "What is this?"
And the shadow responded, though not with words. No, it didn't need to speak. In an instant, I felt it. A sudden pressure in my chest, like something heavy was pressing down on my heart. It was suffocating, pulling the breath out of me.
It wanted me to stay. It wanted me to watch.
I took one more step toward the door, and that was when the shadow moved again. Closer, much closer. The air around me seemed to bend, warping with every step it took. It was now directly in front of me, blocking the door. I could see the outline of its hand, long, bony fingers, cold and skeletal. And when it reached out toward me, I felt the temperature drop even further until it was unbearable. I couldn't breathe. My chest was tight. My head was spinning.
And in that moment, I realized just how much I had underestimated what was happening here. I had thought this was just another celebrity event, another night in the world of the rich and famous. But I was wrong. I had walked into something far more dangerous, far more ancient.
Something I wasn't supposed to see.
What happened next shattered everything I thought I knew about this world.
I don't remember how I got out of that room, or even when exactly I stopped trembling. I can't tell you the moment my feet started moving or the instant the door finally opened before me. What I do remember, what's burned into my memory, is the feeling of complete wrongness. Everything felt warped. The walls seemed closer now, suffocating. I could still hear the faint hum, the hum from the corner of the room where that shadow had stood. It still lingered in the back of my mind, pulsing softly like an unspoken threat. The air felt like it was trying to choke me, as if I wasn't supposed to be breathing it. Like I had broken some invisible rule by even stepping into that room. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air, but it didn't feel any fresher. It felt stale, heavy with secrets. Like the walls had ears, like someone or something was listening to every step I took. And then I heard it. A voice. At first, it was barely a whisper, so faint I almost thought it was my imagination. But it wasn't. It was real. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart thudding in my chest. The voice wasn't coming from anywhere in particular, but I could feel it in my bones. It was cold, hollow, a whisper from the void. Don't leave. The words chilled me to my core. I didn't turn around. I didn't want to. I couldn't. I kept walking, my steps quick and erratic, as though my body had decided to run without asking me if that was what I wanted. I passed through the maze of backstage halls, trying to make sense of what I had just witnessed. That shadow, Kanye's distant, hollow eyes, the whispers. What had they done? What had I just walked into? I reached the back door, but before I could even touch the handle, I felt it again. The air thickened. Something was wrong. Something was following me. It wasn't just the weight of the night's events pressing down on me anymore. No, it was something else. Something alive. I turned quickly, the breath catching in my throat. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the empty hall, dark and silent, stretching out endlessly in front of me. But the feeling didn't leave. I could feel it in the pit of my stomach, the deep, gnawing feeling that something wasn't just behind me, but was waiting for me. It wasn't physical. It wasn't something I could touch. But it was there. Its presence was undeniable, and it was closer than ever. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen. Every muscle in my body locked into place, caught in some unseen force that held me there. I wanted to break free from this nightmare, but I couldn't. It was then that I heard something else. A sound. A soft, scraping noise coming from the floor. I turned slowly, dread creeping in like ice, and saw the shadow again. But this time, it wasn't standing still. No, it was crawling. It was crawling toward me. The figure in the corner of the room, the one I had thought was some kind of hallucination or a trick of the lighting, was moving now. But it wasn't walking. It wasn't even standing. It was crawling, dragging itself along the floor like a grotesque spider, its limbs twisted in unnatural ways. The darkness that surrounded it seemed to swallow everything in its path, warping the light and pulling it inward. The closer it got, the colder it became. The hallway seemed to stretch longer with each passing second, and yet, somehow, I felt it closing in on me. The walls felt like they were closing in, like the whole place was shifting and reshaping, bending around this creature. It wasn't real, it couldn't be, but there it was, moving closer, its movements jerky, unnatural. And then it stopped. It stopped right in front of me, right in the middle of the hallway, blocking my path. It was so close now I could hear its breath, or what passed for it. It wasn't a normal sound. It was wet, labored, like something choking on its own air. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but the scream never came. My throat was tight, constricted by fear, by something darker. My mind was screaming for me to run, but my body refused to listen. I couldn't move. The shadow seemed to loom over me, towering taller than any man, its form shifting and swirling in the dim light, as if it wasn't quite fully here, not quite a part of this world. Its form distorted, stretching, as though it were made of smoke. The hum from earlier returned, growing louder now, vibrating the very air around me. I felt the darkness touch me. It wasn't physical. It wasn't a hand on my skin. It was deeper. It was like the darkness itself was entering me, wrapping around my soul, pulling me into its void. I felt coldness fill every part of me. I felt empty. And then it spoke.
not with words, but with thoughts. You shouldn't have come. The voice was inside my head now, filling my mind with an overwhelming, suffocating pressure. It was cold, cruel, and ancient, like a whisper from somewhere that shouldn't exist. It wasn't the voice of the shadow, not in the traditional sense. It wasn't the voice of a man or a beast. It was something else, something older. And then came the worst part. I understood it. The moment it spoke, I knew exactly what it meant. I knew exactly what it wanted. It wanted me to stay. It wanted me to stay in this world of darkness, to become a part of it. I felt a sudden jolt in my chest, a pressure I couldn't describe. It felt like something was being forced inside of me, something unnatural, something wrong. My vision blurred, the world spinning around me as if everything was being pulled into that one point in front of me, the shadow, the darkness, the thing that had been waiting for me. I stumbled back, my legs giving out from under me, but the shadow didn't move. It didn't need to. I was already in its grip. That's when I saw it. Something I will never forget. From the darkness, something reached out. A hand, twisted and gnarled, emerged from the void. But it wasn't a human hand. It wasn't even alive in the way we understand it. The fingers were elongated, clawed, and they seemed to stretch farther than they should have, as if they were pulling at the very fabric of reality. I reached out instinctively to stop it, to shove it away, but I couldn't touch it. My hand passed through it like it wasn't even there. You can never leave. That voice again, and this time, I felt it in my chest. It was inside me, making me feel the weight of the words. I wasn't just hearing it, I was becoming it. And that's when everything changed. But what came next, I wasn't prepared for. I ran. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a decision made in the calm of my mind. It was instinct, pure, primal fear that made my body move before my thoughts could catch up. The moment that hand reached out from the darkness, stretching beyond what was natural, I felt a surge of terror unlike anything I had ever experienced in my life. And I ran. My feet slammed against the cold, hard floor of the hallway, my breath ragged and wild, my pulse pounding in my ears. Every step felt like it might be my last. I could hear my own frantic footsteps echoing down the hall, but the sound seemed distant, muffled. It was like the world had suddenly gone out of focus, like I was moving through water. I didn't stop. I couldn't. The thing, whatever it was still behind me. The darkness, the hum, the coldness. It wasn't just in the room anymore. It was in the air, in my skin, in my lungs, suffocating me with every breath I took. I had to get out. I had to get away. I reached the door, the exit, the one that led me to safety. I saw the light outside, the familiar space of the world I knew. My fingers fumbled for the handle, shaking uncontrollably as I tried to turn it. But it wouldn't budge. The door wouldn't open. The handle wouldn't turn. I pulled harder. My entire body pressed against it, but the door was stuck. It wasn't locked, but it might as well have been. I couldn't breathe. The air was thick, closing in on me. And I knew that whatever was in that room was still there, still following me. It was hunting me. Please, I whispered. Panic rising in my chest like a storm. My fingers scraped against the wood, but it felt like the door was becoming part of the wall itself. Nothing made sense anymore. And then I heard a voice.
Not the dark one, not the voice from the shadow, but someone else. A familiar voice. "You're not leaving." I spun around, my heart seizing in my chest. The man in the suit, the one who had been with Kanye earlier, was standing at the other end of the hallway, watching me. He hadn't made a sound, but somehow, he was already there. His presence cutting through the panic in my chest like a knife. His eyes were cold, emotionless, but there was something more now, something darker. He stepped forward, slowly, deliberately. He didn't need to rush. He knew he had me. "You can't leave," he said, his voice as empty and final as a tomb. "You're already part of this now." I tried to back away, my mind spinning, but my legs wouldn't obey me. I felt paralyzed, trapped in that hallway, caught between the shadow and the man who had just spoken. "You're too far in," he continued. "You were never meant to be here. But now, you are. You've seen it. And now, it's part of you." His words wrapped around me like chains, pulling me deeper into something I couldn't escape. The weight of what he was saying, what it meant, sunk in slowly. I had seen something I shouldn't have. I had crossed a line. I had looked into the darkness, and now it was staring back at me. "You were never supposed to see this," he said again, his voice lower now, filled with a venomous finality. "But you did. And now, you'll pay for it." I didn't understand. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but my throat was tight. The words stuck, lodged in my chest like a stone. All I could do was stare at him, frozen, unable to move. "You saw him," he whispered, his voice now almost a hiss. "You saw Kanye. You saw what he really is. You saw the truth behind the mask. And now, you're one of us." That phrase hit me like a punch to the gut. One of us? What did that mean? What had I witnessed that was so terrible? I had seen Kanye, sure, but this wasn't real. It couldn't be. None of it made sense. But as I stood there, staring at the man, my mind started to piece it together. The strange behavior, the darkness that seemed to seep into everything, the voice that whispered from the shadows, it all began to connect, to form a picture I didn't want to see. Kanye wasn't just a celebrity. He wasn't just a man. He was something else, something ancient. And the people around him, they were all part of something much darker, something that had been hidden away for years. The man took another step closer, and that's when I saw it, the smallest shift in his expression. It was almost imperceptible, but I saw it. The corner of his mouth twitched upward in the faintest of smiles. "Don't you worry," he said, as though he could sense my fear. "We all have our part to play. And now, you've played yours." His words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over. "You've played yours." I didn't know what it meant, but the way he said it felt like an irreversible change, like I had just crossed a threshold I couldn't undo. I tried again to turn the handle, to push myself free from whatever trap I had found myself in, but it wouldn't budge. The door was solid, immovable, as though the world had decided to close me in. The man in the suit took another step forward, his eyes narrowing. "Don't fight it," he said coldly. "It won't help." Suddenly, the ground beneath me seemed to tilt, and I stumbled. I caught myself against the wall, but the sensation of dizziness wouldn't stop. It was like the room itself was shifting. The air seemed to press in. the walls closing tighter around me. The weight of the darkness felt unbearable now, as if it was pushing on me from every angle. I was suffocating. I couldn't run. I couldn't escape. "Why?" I gasped, my voice barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?"
The man didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes spoke the truth.
I had seen too much. And now, I would be one of them, just like Kanye, just like the others who had been drawn into this world. The world where reality didn't exist, where everything was controlled from the shadows. A world that was far older, far darker than anyone could ever imagine. The world I was now part of. But what happened next took things to a whole new level. I don't sleep anymore. I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see it, the shadow, the whispers, the cold touch, the way the darkness pressed in like it was alive, waiting for me to slip. Every night, I feel it watching me, waiting for the moment I'd let my guard down. If you ever hear the hum or feel the air get thick, know that something's watching you, something that doesn't belong here, something that wants you to join it. The worst part? It doesn't stop. Even now, I can feel it creeping closer, just beyond the edge of my thoughts. I don't know when it will come for me again, but I know it will. And I know it's never far. If I disappear after this, you'll know why. And you'll know where to look, because whatever was in that room, it wasn't human. And it's still out there, still waiting.